Good morning. I'm audible, I'm visible. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So, our day is going to be from 10 to 1. 1 to 2 is your lunch break. Please plan accordingly. Thereafter, 2 to 5, part B, part A. Then 5 to 5:30 is your break. And then 5:30 to 8 p.m. is part C. Please pay attention to this. Accordingly plan everything. 1 to 2 is one break, 5 to 5:30 is the other break. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Mini breaks I'll see according to where I need to give it. 10 minutes that I am flexible in, that's not an issue. We'll wait for 2 to 3 minutes for everybody to join in. Today we have to discuss Maurya, Ashoka and Dhamma plus administration plus post-Maurya Maurya. We will also discuss South Indian dynasties and then go to Gupta, thereby more or less completing ancient today. We'll do certain previous year questions if needed and if we reach a certain point. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, good morning. Good morning. We'll start at 10:05. Waiting for everybody to join in. If you want to ask something, you can ask. And if you want to call and ask something, that is also open right now. That is basically not the way it is. See, 5 plus 5 plus 10. This is projected out of ancient, medieval, and art and culture. Can be 3 plus 3 plus 5 also. That is totally on the paper how they've divided it. And in mains, you have 1 to 3 questions for sure out of art and culture. So the problem is that you can't ignore ancient medieval because 10 to 6 questions are out of ancient medieval. Over and above that, when we talk about art and culture, for writing an answer of art and culture, you need to know ancient medieval, because if you don't know ancient medieval, you will never be able to write an answer. This is the basic mistake which students do, because if you are going to write an introduction for any art and culture question, you would have to write the historical context, and if you don't know the historical context, then how do you write it? Gayu, you would have received Nitin Singhania plus PPT for art and culture, and we RS Sharma and what we call as Satish Chandra plus Bipin Chandra. I've already, I think this is your first class, Gayu. because you're asking something which I discussed last week itself. That is why PPT plus NCRT is a must, is a minimum. Thereafter, R.S. Sharma, Satish Chandra, or be it anything, is for reading, not for learning. So you have to make sure that you are going through the PPT plus the NCRTs, new ones. And if you're actually going through R.S. Sharma, Satish Chandra, Bipin Chandra, your old NCRT is also covered. So PPT plus NCRT is bare minimum you have to do. Like this, you don't need the terms to write an answer of art and culture. See, I am telling you one thing very, very straightforward, and in a way that you should not be a utilitarian when you're preparing. When are you giving the examination? 2024, maximum 2025. If you are going to become this type of a utilitarian that I will do this for this much, this for that much, then it will not work, because UPSC is now becoming more and more vague. So any day, you have to do everything once for sure. Thereafter, what you emphasize on is totally your call. But if you are already having this mindset that I will only do this much, I will only do that much, that will never work generally. So if you start to cut down in UPSC, then automatically everything will start to get cut down. I'll give you, see, once we are done with ancient, I will give you a strategy to go for ancient 1 year, multi-year. I will do that. First, let me finish ancient. Just because there are terms, you can't run away from something. Tell me one thing straightforward. Because you have to learn articles, do you leave polity all articles? Because you have to learn all the name of the forests, the national parks, and the dams, and the mountains, and the rivers, do you leave all of that? Because you have to learn something, do you leave that subject itself? Then why are you doing that for history? That okay, I have to learn maybe 50 terms, and that is why these, because of these terms, I will leave history itself. This is the problem. And the students who will leave ancient and medieval will never be able to write good answers of art and culture, because they will always be clueless where that period is. So they will ask you about Gupta and Chola. For example, the latest question was what? That how did the Guptas and Cholas contribute to art and architecture? If you don't know who are the Guptas, if you don't know where are the Cholas, or there are two types of Cholas, then you will never be able to write any answer. So if you are ready to learn something in other subjects, if you're ready to learn something else in other subjects, then why are you leaving it here? This is the problem. Need to change this attitude. You will do this in the art and culture also. You will say that I'll not do dances, I'll not do music, I'll not do theater, I'll not do martial arts. I'll leave everything because terms are there. That makes no sense. Those are straightforward, very, very simple questions. Maximum facts are 50. And as it is, I'm not asking you to learn them in a month. I'm asking you to learn them in 365 days. Even if you don't have that much, you still have close to 200 days. That is more than enough to actually revise and study history. The problem is about priority. You can learn each and every, for example, article, or for example, mountain, or for example, river, for example, anything, everything. But if you're not ready to learn about your own culture, which is equally relevant for your interview, then there's a problem. That's a mental block then, which you need to remove. That's it. Shiva, it will come. Don't worry. There is a certain issue with regards to that. It will come. Don't worry about that. Okay. So, our story starts where we left it yesterday. We've already discussed Alexander's invasion. We've already discussed the concept of the different polities, and we have to start with Ashoka plus his administration plus Dhamma. Now, very simply, yesterday what we did was we tried to understand how their northwestern border was stabilized by an understanding with the Seleucid Empire. We also discussed how there are Greek sources for the Chandraguptan period or Bindusara's period because of the fact that there is a major connection with this sector itself, the Seleucid Empire. Now we need to understand what makes Ashoka so important, what makes Ashoka generally a person which we talk about so much. So the discussion we need to have is that there's one episode which everybody quotes, there's one episode which is considered a major turning point in ancient history, and then we have to talk about his administration, which is centralized. I have to discuss what is centralized and decentralized, and then his Dhamma. So let's talk about Ashoka. Everybody's ready? Can we start? Yes? Okay. Now, we all know Ashoka for one standard story, which is that Ashoka fought the Kalinga War, and after looking at close to 1 lakh people dead and 1.5 lakh people injured, Ashoka's heart changed. But if you reel back a little bit, there is a way in which Ashoka projects this story, because we know about this story through Ashoka only. Through Ashoka only, because he had a very good tendency, a very what we call a sophisticated tendency of writing everything down on his edicts, but that has its own politics also. Now, it is believed within different traditions that either Ashoka had 9 brothers or had 99 brothers. The number may vary in between these two, but what we believe is that he killed all of them to come to power. Now, the question is, why didn't Ashoka's heart change here? When he was killing his brothers, he did not do anything. Now, he did multiple wars before Kalinga. Still, his heart did not change. And even when 1 lakh people were dead, why not at 50,000 his heart changed? Why not in between the Kalinga war his heart changed? Nobody is denying that his orientation changed. Nobody is denying the fact that he may have been a changed man. But why is that when it suited him, he was an Ajivik, and once the empire reached its maximum strength and territory, then he said, now no war. See, people tend to talk about Ashoka's conversion to Buddhism. Rather, it's not even conversion. Ashoka's understanding of Buddhism is basically his Ashokan Dhamma as a religious philosophy. That Ashoka discussed it as a religious philosophy. I argue that it is not a religious philosophy. And there's a new literature which is arguing this in the same way. It's a politico-religious philosophy, in the sense that till he needed to kill people, he was an Ajivik. Why did it suit him to be an Ajivik at that point of time, when he actually needed to expand? This is the expansion phase. Why does he need to be an Ajivik? Jainism would not allow ahimsa. Very good. Himanshu, great. And Ajiviks. Ajiviks have the concept of what? What is the core ideology of Ajiviks? Yes, very good, Avinav. Destiny or Niyati. So basically, Ashoka said, I was destined to kill all of my brothers different people, and the Kalinga war was destined to happen. It was in my niyati, in my fate, to kill 1 lakh people, and 1.5 lakh people were wounded. Here I have no control because wo likha hai. It's already written. So I will do it only. Now that I have consolidated my empire to the biggest point, or the largest point, or the geographical extent is at the point where it cannot expand further. Now my heart has changed. I do not want war. I just now want tolerance, ahimsa, peace, not like that. What I'm trying to argue and try to understand this point, during his expansionary phase, he chooses to be an ajivik. In his consolidation phase, he goes into or develops a very interesting concept, which is his dhamma, as a consolidation tool, which is a politico religious philosophy. So to understand dhamma in very innocent way as a religious philosophy, you are basically forgetting the master stroke of Ashoka. There has been no smarter ruler, more powerful ruler, and what we call as a public relations expert in this history of the world itself. Ashoka was very good at projecting what he needed to project. If Ashoka would not have written that my heart changed, would we ever even have cared if Ashoka killed 1 lakh or 1.5 lakh people? Every ruler kills. Every ruler does violence. Politics is based on violence. Expansion is based on violence. If he does not say that I killed 1 lakh people, okay, you and me would be studying Ashoka as a ruler, standard ruler. Samudragupta was not the one who said that my heart changed, and we know that Samudragupta was very powerful. So understand this, that Ashoka wanted to project something, and his Dhamma philosophy is much more sophisticated than what we really think about. This is the first point. Is this first point making sense to you? That Dhamma should not be seen generally as a concept of a religious philosophy, but a political religious philosophy. Ashoka did not believe in coercion way of consolidation. He wanted the empire. Yes, why? Yes, very good, Samhita. That's a very good way of putting it. He could have used force to consolidate, but that force, when coercion is there for consolidation, it doesn't really work. Rather, he uses what we call a soft power, which is to bring everybody together under this concept of I am your father, everybody's brother, we will not fight. But I will tell you, there are contradictions in Dhamma also. This is the first point. Are we all in agreement? You agree to disagree, that's a separate issue altogether. Are you able to peer through the politics of Ashoka? Okay, now comes the second point. We know of all these wars. We'll come back to this administration later. We know of all this because of these are called major and minor rock edicts and pillar edicts. This is called a major rock edict. This is called a minor rock edict. Very simply, this is nothing but small rock, big rock, major, minor, and this is called a pillar edict. So Ashoka wrote with Brahmi script in Prakrit and in Khroshti and in Greek script, because he was writing in the borders also. He placed these minor, major, and pillar edicts in certain places. The placement of these major, minor rock edicts is very, very interesting. I'll tell you why. See, if I connect all the different dots of major rock edicts, what do I get? What do I get? You get the boundary of the empire. Now, there's an irony here. I'll tell you what is the irony. The irony is that in no minor rock edict, which is within the empire, there is any mention of the Kalinga War. He talks about Dhamma, he talks about the concept of how everybody needs to be tolerant. But on major rock edicts, which are in Kalinga and are in the northwestern sector, he had a very interesting way of writing his edicts. Very interesting way of writing his edicts. Now, for example, I'll give you a very simple example. You are introduced to me. You are introduced to me. And I introduce myself in the following fashion. My name is Abhishek Mishra. I was jailed for 10 years for hitting a person because he annoyed me. But now I've changed. I'm a changed man. So it's really nice to meet you. Or you meet me and I say that I am the same person who killed 50 people in a war, but now I'm changed and I'm a changed man now. What is the messaging which I'm trying to push here? What is the messaging which I'm trying to push here? It's called a passive aggressive concept. You know the concept of passive aggressive tone? Passive aggressive means that I am not trying to be aggressive, but I'm trying to give you a message that, see, I'm the same person who can kill a person if you annoy me. But now I've changed. So, if I wanted to change my image, would I actually go and introduce myself as I'm the same person who killed 1.5 lakh people in the Kalinga War, but now I've changed? No. Basically, on his borders, Ashoka very strategically, this is why I call him a public relations expert, very strategically pushed in this message that do not mess or do not think I'm a peace-loving ruler, or do not think that this Dhamma has made me weak. I am the same person who fought the Kalinga War. I can kill 1 lakh people for expansion, and this is what is the message which everybody reads before entering the Mauryan Empire itself. So he may have guilt, his heart may have changed, but the way he projected it, the way he placed all these different edicts, the way he wrote them, all tend to tell us that he was using the Kalinga War also as a warning as much as a moment of change. Because there is no mention of the Kalinga War within the empire. It's only when you are at the boundary, before entering the empire, you will read this major rock edict, and it will very simply say that this is the way I was, and now I've changed. I have one edict translation. Do you want to see how he wrote, or do you want to see how he actually put in the passive aggressive message? Very good. Now see, this is the edict which is in Kalinga itself, and I'll read it out to you. And you see how he places words and how he actually creates a certain narrative. 8 years after becoming king, I conquered Kalinga. About 1.5 lakh people were captured, and more than 1 lakh of the people were killed. This fills me with sorrow. Why? Whenever an independent land is conquered, lakhs of people die, and many of them are taken prisoners. Brahmins and monks also die. People who are kind to the relatives and their slaves and servants die or lose their loved ones. That is why I am sad and have decided to observe Dhamma and to teach others about it as well. I believe that winning people over through Dhamma is much better than conquering them through force. I am inscribing this message for the future so that my son and grandson after me should not think of war. Instead, they should try to think about the how to spread Dhamma. Dhamma is a word, Prakrit word for Dharma. Now, tell me one thing. If I remove this part here, if I remove this much, does it really actually do any difference to the message he's trying to send? If I remove this part of the inscription, would it actually make any difference to the message he's trying to send? No. This is called passive aggressive messaging, wherein he's trying to warn the person who's reading that I am also the same person who's done this, but now I have changed. See, Ashoka was not the person who gave up war. He's not the person who actually gave up war. He introduced a concept of what is called, I'll tell you, I'll write it down for you, which is the concept of, one second, yeah. This is the concept of just and unjust war, righteous and non-righteous war. Now tell me one thing, who decides what war is righteous, what war is not righteous? Or what war is just, other one is unjust? In his mind, if a war is just, it is justified. In his mind, if the war is unjust, it is unjustified. So very simply, he did not give up violence. He gave up violence as a way of very simply consolidating the empire. He did fight wars if needed, and for him that was a just war. Understand the politics here, understand the messaging here. We know that Ashoka changed. We know that Ashoka had a change of heart. We know that he got influenced by Buddhism. We know that there's something called Dhamma. But people tend to talk about Ashoka in the concept of a religious person. He became a very religious person, talked about a concept of what we call as religious transformation. His way of life changed in the way that he shunned war. What we are trying to argue here is, yes, his heart changed. I'm not denying that. Yes, he may have gone through guilt, but the way he has created a certain messaging or a history around it is not actually a coincidence that very simply, till the point he needed to be an Ajivik, he was an Ajivik. When he needed to transform, he transformed. So the timing of everything is very, very, what we call as convenient. That expansionary phase, Ajivik, everything is written down. Consolidation phase, political religious philosophy of Dhamma consolidates everything, keeps everybody together. So in international ways, international relations, if you want to use that term, it's called hard power, soft power. Very simply, initially he is using force, and that is necessary to expand the empire. But once he needs to consolidate the empire, rather than using the threat of force, he rather says that I am the same person who can use force, but I choose not to use it. So his way of messaging was interesting. And Ashoka knew that we would be reading it. Ashoka did not write the edicts for himself or for the people who were alive at that point of time. Ashoka wrote it for the future, which is an extremely sophisticated understanding of existence. Ashoka very simply knew that the world will either see me as the one who destroyed Kalinga and killed 1 lakh people, or they will see me as a person who transformed thereafter. So basically, his transformation story, he is the one which takes precedence over what he did before it. So very simply, nobody is asking you this. You don't have to go and tell this to the examiner. You don't have to go this and talk to the interview or talk in the interview like this. You don't even have to go and argue with anybody. But what I'm trying to argue here is that very simply, there's a way he messaged it, there's a way he packaged it, and there's a way he conveyed it. So there's much more at play than just being a standard religious philosophy. Makes sense? If war comes, he would have to fight it because under his understanding, it was a just war. See, if I'll very simply ask you a very simple question. If Ashoka hated war so much, if Ashoka wanted ahimsa so much, then why didn't he turn into Jainism? His grandfather was a Jain. He could have easily gone to a Jain tradition. Why did he choose Buddhism over Jainism? Try to understand this point. Why would he not choose Jainism, and why would he actually choose Buddhism? Because Buddhism was flexible. Buddhism was flexible. It did not say that no, you can't kill anybody. So when I'll show you the principles of Dhamma also, you will realize that there is much more at play here than just being a standard religious philosophy. Do not think of it as just a religious philosophy. The thing which it is a politico-religious philosophy. See, this could help a optional level student, but the point is we are not at the optional level. For you, Dhamma, what it is, what is the basic principle will come in the examination. That too, they've never asked a question on Dhamma. But what I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to give you an understanding beyond what the book would tell you, and we are having an academic level discussion. Yes. So can we now rather concentrate on the administration and then talk about Dhamma and its principles? What I said, did it make sense, or it's a simplistic argument, it's an exaggeration, or it actually logically makes sense the way it is? Okay, perfect. Now, as I told you, Ashoka had to come to power by fighting the sons of his father, or what we call as his brothers, or Bindusara. And we know that he had a very bitter warfare with his brothers. 8th regnal year, turning point. Disturbed by the death and destruction, Ashoka turned towards Dhamma. Remember, Dhamma is not a new religion. Dhamma is not Buddhism. Dhamma is Ashoka's interpretation of Buddhism. Please understand this point. Because he does not take everything. Regnal means rule here. So he does not take everything. He very simply picks up what he needs to pick up. Now, for us, what is equally important is Ashoka's administration. We'll come back to Dhamma as the last topic, and then we'll end this section. Ashoka's administration. Everybody's following me till this point. Anybody wants to say something, or anybody wants to ask something? Agree, disagree, want to add something? Please do tell me. Sure, Vivek, if you want to put it like that. Okay. Agree, there's nothing. True, Ardeep, that is true. He just wanted to protect his empire. It's a political philosophy. Very good. See, Samita, there would have been wars for sure after Kalinga War. The scale was not as big as Kalinga War, and they have not been very well documented. See, for us, sources matter. Even if there would have been a war, maybe nothing was documented. So the simple point is documentation is something which is important for us. War would have happened. You tell me very straightforward, can a ruler actually rule without violence in a period like ancient India? No, there has to be a certain fear deterrence. Deterrence is what really matters. Today, the deterrence is the nuclear warfare or nuclear weapons. Deterrence comes through force. and that deterrence had to be there. Nobody could take him so easily that no, he'll not fight a war. So yeah, the point is that maybe there were, but that's not a given. Ashoka was Sridevi like his father and Ajivik, because we know this through the fact that the Barabar and Nagarjuni hill complex was given by an Ajivik king who was no one else but Ashoka and then Dashrath. Abhijit, again, full speculation. Full speculation. The point is that we have no proof for that. Whoever is talking like that or telling you this I need to see the proof or the sources. Yes, that is also true that Ashoka may have not wanted to document them. That makes sense. Yes, why not? He's an Ajivik, allegedly converts to Buddhism. Okay. Now, can we move on? Everybody's basic curiosity. You can always have a conversation with me if you want to add something. That is a part of our process here. If you're live with me, why not? Okay. Now, in order to understand Ashoka's administration, you need to understand the difference between two terms. One is called centralized administration, and this will be very, very important for us generally. Centralized administration. And the second one is called decentralized administration. This will help us generally in the way that there will be certain tendencies. I will presume that you know this concept as we go on further. Now, let's talk about centralization. And how does it manifest itself in administration? See, centralized administration, you have the king, and the king you have the king and the king very simply has a what we call as army of officers, and then you have the people. We call this as bureaucracy. The most important feature of a centralized administration is the fact that the king has direct control over the people via his officers. The officers are appointed, removed by the king, paid salaries, and very simply, there's a concentration of power here. Concentration of power in the king. Very simply, the officer acts like an intermediary, but that intermediary has no power in himself. So very simply, the connection of the king is direct, and therefore this is called a centralized system of control, wherein there's only one power center, which is the king. This is the only power center. And in a centralized administrative setup, rebellions or disintegration or fragmentation is very rare. So fragmentation of political structure is rare, in the sense that mostly you will never see that the officers have become too powerful or the empire disintegrates from within. So centralization is always considered a good system of control when it comes to ancient or medieval India. Now let's contrast this with decentralized system. When we talk about decentralized model, it is a very interesting way in which power is dispersed. You have the king, the local power, or what we call as local power center or intermediary, and then you have the people. Here the most interesting characteristic is king controls the local power centers and the local power centers control the people. Very simply, there is no direct connection, no direct control over the people. There's dispersion of power, and the most important concept here is local power centers real hold real power, king holds symbolic power. So mostly in this type of a setup, they are not powerful enough to displace the king, so accept the overlordship and the king not powerful enough to consolidate power within him, so has to operate through local power centers. Now tell me one thing, within this structure, what is the biggest fear or what is the biggest problem in this structure? Abhinav, we are a mix of centralization, decentralization. Yes, Avni, very good. As soon as this becomes very powerful, fragmentation is a given. Fragmentation is very easy, very, very easy. In the sense, we will call this concept what we call as feudalistic tendencies, which will come to in the post-modern period. But I'm right now theoretically discussing the concept of decentralization with you. So when we talk about centralization and decentralization, here king is the only power center. But in decentralized model, there are multiple nodes of powers, and fragmentation is mostly rare. But here fragmentation is inherently inbuilt to it. So why are we discussing this right now? Because in ancient India and in the history of modern, what we call as in history of India itself, the only fully centralized state was Mauryan. Is Mauryan. Not even post-Mauryan, not even the Guptas were centralized. The distinction that the Mauryans have is that they had a very elaborate system of control, a very elaborate system of bureaucracy, and they were the only empire which had such a big expanse, and at the same point of time, they were fully centralized also. Centralized and in a way, most of the subcontinent. This is why Mauryan Empire or the Mauryans are considered so important, because nobody was able to emulate the same for the next till this point in that way. Now, please, as one of you said, don't use this concept of centralization, decentralization for modern federalism, because democracy, decentralization is considered better. In the sense, we have a three-tiered system: center, state, and then panchayats, or what we call as ULBs, local bodies, urban local bodies, and panchayats. Now, very simply, the point is that in democracy, decentralization is considered important, and we have democratic decentralization, which is called representative government. The more it decentralizes, it's better. But when you become an IAS officer, when you become an IPS officer, when you become an Indian forest officer, you are under a centralized control of the center itself. So in modern democracies, modern nation state, there's a mix of centralization plus decentralization. But centralization is not considered good in modern India or in modern terms, because that means it's a dictatorial power. Putin, Xi Jinping, that is the way it is centralization of power. We want decentralization in democracy, because that way the people have the power. This structure is not good for modern democracy, but it is good for a period in which monarchical systems prevailed. This model, basically, in a modified way, is the way we actually work today. This is considered good in democracy, which is dispersion of power as much as possible. That way, people have control over the state itself. So I hope you are getting my point, that if you're giving me modern day examples, you are actually mixing things up a little bit, which makes no sense, or rather is not appropriate for modern times itself. Right? You're getting my point. This is a very fundamental concept. If you will understand this fundamental concept, then only we move forward. Very, very fundamental to your understanding, generally, which is the concept of centralization and decentralization. Anybody has any issue, if you're not following, if you're not able to understand, then I will again repeat myself, because this is going to be taken as a given when I will go forward teaching anything else to you. Anybody has any issue? If you're asking me to repeat, what part is not clear to you? Randomly don't write repeat. What is not clear to you? The fact that you have a what we call as concept of concentration of power with the king. Then you have officers, bureaucracy, who are appointed by the king, can be removed by the king, and therefore people are directly controlled by the king. And in a decentralized model, local power centers are permanent, they cannot be removed, and therefore the king has to operate through them itself. So very simply, a decentralized model is considered a problematic model because there is fragmentation inbuilt into it. On the other hand, in a centralized model, there is a very rare chance of internal fragmentation or crumbling from within. So the distinction of the Maurans, as I said, is very simply the concept of a centralized administration. Dictatorship can be decentralized. No, dictatorship cannot be decentralized. Then it's not dictatorship. Then it's basically a republic, president rule and this and that. Dictatorship is centralization of power. What we call in world history is totalitarian state. Can I move forward? Okay. Now, the the problem with having a centralized administration is that as a UPSC aspirant, your life has become a little bit problematic because the Mauryans have a very elaborate administrative structure. Now you need to know the administrative terminologies because that is a very, very important concept for you. That you need to know the terms and they can be asked in the examination generally. So before I go into that aspect, since the morning we have discussed, or rather in the past 1 hour we've discussed Ashoka's political religious philosophy, Ashoka's messaging, and the concept of centralized and decentralization. If you all are on the same page, I will go into the factual part where I can't help you, but I will tell you how to manage it. Can we take the pain for the next 10-15 minutes and then go back to Dhamma? Okay. Now, we know about the administration this much because of Arthashastra. And the first thing which Arthashastra proposes, and we already know it is well organized, efficient, centralized administration, is called the Saptang Rajya concept. In a sense, what Kautilya argues is there are 7 pillars on which an empire has to survive on, or what makes them an empire are these 7 pillars. Saptang Raj. Now, what are the 7 pillars? Swami, Amatya, Janpad, Durga, Kosha, Danda, Mitra. Now, let me make it in this way that you have the king, Swami, then you have the 7 limbs, including him, the other 6 limbs which make a centralized administrative setup. What are they? You have Amatya, ministers, Janpad, people. So, people, ministers. Janapad, Amatya. Thereafter, you have Kosha, treasury, Durga, fortified capital, and Danda. Kosha, Danda, Durga, Mitra, which is very simply Kosha means treasury, justice and law and order, fortified capital, allies. According to Kautilya, if all of these come together, then only you have actually a state. But can you notice one thing? According to Kautilya, one thing is missing in this, which is very today considered fundamental for a state. What is it that, according to him, very simply should have been there? Very good, Shiva. Great. Which is that somehow an army is not mentioned only. A modern nation state today would argue that an army is a prerequisite. A standing army, military is prerequisite. But for Kautilya, army was not one of the most important limbs of a state. Police comes here, Danda, law and order is there, which is internal. administration. But army as a standing army, military, was something which he actually didn't talk about only. Which shows that how we today think that the first thing which a state needs is an army itself. Which is that external threat was always considered, or is today considered, the most important threat. While on the other hand, for Kautilya, internal administration was much more important than external threat itself. This is a very interesting way of understanding administration and states, because this goes against the understanding what we believe today as a modern nation state. Rather than arguing for a mitra, we have this concept that for every modern state, nation state, has to be an enemy, there has to be an army, there has to be a police, and what actually makes that state a state is a standing army and an internal administration which is efficient. But according to Kautilya, armies are not a prerequisite for a state to exist. That also is basically a reflection of what was the politics at that point of time, and the power of the Mauryans was so much that nobody was ready to challenge them in that regard. But the point of the matter, if you're able to understand, is that for us to understand this worldview, we also need to understand the historical context, which is better. The better concept is not there. Today's world is different and ancient is different. Try to understand this. Not everything has what we call as applicability in the modern context. This is a period in which nobody would touch the Mauryans. So he thought army is not necessary. However, today the geopolitics is different. So there are two different concepts itself. This is called chronologically being incorrect. What we are today is very different. What Ashoka was very, very different. So you need to know the different, what are called limbs of the Saptang theory, and you need to remember them generally. Anybody has any issue here? No? Okay. Now comes his central and provincial administration, which you need to understand. First, I'll discuss them with you, and then I'll make a flowchart in which I'll integrate everything together. So, very simply, the way his core administration, from where Patliputra he used to operate, he had the standard tiered model of control, in the sense that he had a head of department called a Tirtha. Then he had under him Adhyaks, who used to take, very simply, the responsibility of managing that area or portfolio. Then they could have two types of officers within them: Amatya, an executive officer, or Mahamatya, which is a special duty officer, officer special duty. To give you a very simple idea of modern counterparts, think of them like this. This would be a joint secretary. This would be officer on special duty. This would be the secretary of the ministry. And this would be cabinet minister. So, if I make the first half of this within central administration, he had a system in which he has Tirthas. Then under him he has Adhyakshas. And under Adhyakshas there are two types of officers: Mahamatyas and Amatyas. They are ministers. They are in charge of portfolio. They are executive officer. and they are special officers. Anybody has any issue here? Very simple, but the painful part is coming, which is to learn the Tirthas and the Adhyakshas and the Mahamatyas and Mahamatyas. Right? Okay. Now let's go to the provincial administration. We know that there were 4 provinces of within which the whole empire was divided. Uttarpat, Avantirat, you have the Panchapat and Dakshinpat. Basically, one center was Takshila, other was Ujjain, the other one was Tosali, and the other one was Dakshinpat, which is towards the Swarnagiri, which is towards the Maharashtra sector. So, 4 provinces were there. So, there are 4 provinces. They would be managed by governors. So, there are 2 types of governors which could be there. One a Kumara, the other one a Aryaputra. Kumar is the son of the king, if he is the governor, and if a governor is a relative of the king, he is called a Aryaputra. Ashoka, when he was the governor of Takshila, would be called a Kumara or a Aryaputra. He would be called a Kumara. Very good. Now, because he's the son of the king, the sons of the king are called Kumar, who are basically governors. So 4 Kumars could be there as maximum, and 4 Aryaputras could be there because there are 4 provinces only. Thereafter, you have urban and rural administration. Urban administration is with the Pradeshika, Rajuka is for rural administration, and Yukta is attached to both. Very simply gives them secretarial staff or basic support itself. Then under the Rajukas and the Pradeshikas, you have the Thanika, who's a tax collector, and Gopa, who's the accountant, because they have to collect tax generally. And last, at the smallest level, you have the Gramika and the village headman as the most important person. Now, let me again make it more elaborately, and you will understand this. See, king on one side has Tirthas, Adhyakshas, then Mahamatas and Amatyas. And on the other hand, he has Kumaras or Aryaputra. Under the Aryaputra and Kumaras, there are 2 types of officers: Pradeshika and Rajuka. Under the Pradeshika, Thanika, Gopa and Yukta. Thanika, Gopa and Yukta. And under them, they would have Gramika and Gramika. The way it is divided is, this is central administration and this is provincial administration. This is urban. This is rural. Makes sense? Are you able to see why do we call them a centralized empire? Is this making sense? These are the terms which you have to learn. Comes in the examination. Already they've asked Pargana, Suba, Sarkar previously. So you need to know Pradeshika, you need to know Rajuka, Sthanika, Gopa, Yukta, Gramika. Is this making sense? A lot of you are silent. Have to be more clear. Yes. Okay. This is the first hurdle. How to learn is to very simply make these flowcharts multiple times. The names are not very difficult. Tirth, Adhyaksh, Mahamatyas, Pradeshika, the name itself tells you. Rajuka, Yukta, Gopa, Thanika. You have to just write them multiple times. Thereafter, you will understand them. The way to learn always is multiple revisions. So, you have the administration at the central level, which is Tirtha, Adhyaksha, Mahamatya, Amatya. And then thereafter, you have a whole set of officers at the provincial level. Provincial level, four provinces are there. So you would have four Kumaras or four Ariputras. And no, either Kumara or either Ariputra. Cannot be total 8. It could either be 2 Ariputra, 2 Kumara, 2 this, that combination is on the king. The maximum number of Kumaras and Ariputras can be 4. And thereafter, there are multiple Pradeshikas, multiple Rajukas, and this is like the ministerial staff for him. They help him in administration. So Thanika is going to be tax collector, Gopa is going to be accountant, Yukta is the one who has basic, what we call as basic staff help, scribes and everything who help the Pradeshika. If you want to take a modern example of this, very simply, this would be a Sarpanch. This would be a Sarpanch. This would be your IAS headquarters. This would be an DM Sarpanch. This would be governor. Here, as I said, cabinet minister, secretary, joint secretary, and officer on special duty. Now, does it make sense? Okay, this is not a sarpanch, he's a mayor. You wanted to make it like that. This is the problem. You guys go to a level where it actually, now is it better? Your polity is very strong, so you somehow push polity everywhere. Difference between Kumara and Araputra. Kumaras are the sons of the king, whilst Araputras are relatives. There's a difference between son and relative, right? Read. So, are we clear with regards to the structure? Have to be more vocal. First 1 hour. Come on. This can come in the examination. I'm trying to give you modern examples so that you can understand the way it is done. Okay. Now, you also need to know certain tirthas, certain adhyakshas, and certain what we call as amamatyas and amatyas. The ones which are important, I will mark them so that you can actually learn them. But try to understand this, that this is the only place where we have so many terms, because thereafter there are no centralized administrations. So it is only the Mauryan period where you have close to 10 to 15 terms which can be asked or sprinkled in the examination somewhere. Learn them, don't die over them, but learn them generally. You don't have to go into too much detail. The ones which I am telling you are very similar to each other. That is why they can be asked, because UPSC plays with you when it comes to terms generally. So mantri, nobody wants to learn because nobody needs to learn. Mantri means minister. Purohit, everybody knows is a priest. Senapati, again, everybody knows is a military commander. Yuvraj or Kumara basically are the terms which can be used for a crown prince. These are very standard terms which we till today use. Now comes the word where UPSC can play with you. Samaharta, Sanidhata. Very similar to each other but have different responsibilities. Samaharta is chief collector of taxes. Sanidhata is treasury chief. Just to differentiate between the two, this would be IT department, income tax department. This would be RBI or RBI governor. So understand this point that Samaharta, Sanidhata have very similar profiles. That is why you need to remember them. Then the one which I wanted to learn is the Nayaka, which is the city constable, the police in the city itself. Thereafter, Dandapal, everybody knows, police chief, no issues. Then Antpal. Now you tell me, do you need to actually learn Antpal? He is the frontier defense officer. What does Ant mean? What does Ant mean? This is called linguistic logic to answer the questions. End. So Ant means end. End of our empire is the frontier. So therefore Antpal. So very simply, the one which you have to remember here are these two. Samaharta, Sanidhata, and Nayaka if you want to. Other than that, all others which I've omitted are basically not important. And this, and this are very common and standard logical. Very simply, terms which we use till today, you don't have to learn. So three terms here. Samaharta, Sanidhata, Nayaka. Now comes the list of adhyaksh. Basically, every department had a different officer to take care. So, first things first, we are obviously not going to learn this. Dhaksha, 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 dhaksha. This is common to all of them. Now, here again, if you put in the logic, because 2 to 3 can come in the examination, the way they will ask you a question is, in the context of ancient India, the term Akara Dhaksha was used in which period? First type of question. Second could be they could give you Akara, Lakshana, and then give you a match the following to match their departments. So here again, Akara is mines and minerals. What is the mines and minerals department called in Hindi today? What is the term for mines and minerals? Coal, mines, minerals. Khanij and Kara. The word Kara is still used for mines. So the word comes out of Akara. Kara, Khanij are basically the two terms which are used for mines and minerals. So here again, if you know the term Kara, then you can come to Akara. Okay. Then Lakshana. If you remember later Vedic period and thereafter Mahajanpadas, I gave you a list of words which have been used for coinage. And one of that word was Lakshana, minting. So again, link to it in that way. Further, Panya, the ones which I'm marking are important. Panya, trade and commerce. Thereafter, Sita Dhaksha, crown land. Where does the connection of Sita comes with crown land? Why is it called Sita Dhaksha? Yes, the fact that goddess Sita was the daughter of earth. So Sita Dhaksha, crown land. They basically get connected in that way. Throughout history, the word Sita has been used multiple times so as to refer to land because of that connection. Okay. Shulk. Come on, tell me, do you need to really learn this one? Shulk is customs and tolls. Till today, Shulk very simply means customs and tolls. Thereafter, the last one I want you to remember is Patana, ports. So there are 6 terms here which you learn first, and once you've learned these one, then only you move to the next set. So Akara, Lakshana, Panya, Sita, Shulka, and Patana. These are the ones which you can expect in the examination generally. And the fact of the matter is that the Akara, Lakshana, Panya, Sita, Shulka, and Patana, these words again will help you answer in the examination. There has been no direct question from this area. However, we need to be prepared. As I said, the only hard factual area of ancient India generally. So you have Tirthas, Adhyakshas. Thereafter, last thing which I will ask you to remember are called Mahamatyas. These are the officers on special duty. Here, the one which you have to remember is Dhammamatra. He is an officer who spreads the concept of Dhamma. Then Dona Mapaka Mahamatya. Assessment officer. Dona assessment. Other than this, again, learn these terms first, then go to the set which I have not marked. Because these are the terms which are more plausible to be asked if asked. Then, not to learn something here, but just to tell you that there was a judicial department. They had courts, both civil and criminal. And there was also a spies department in which they had different, what we call as spies. Espionage was very common, in which they used to spy with, or used to spy with their frontier states itself. So he knew a lot about his frontier states because they also had a secret agents or spies agency. With this, the painful part is over, which is administration. Administration, just provincial and central. Number of terms are maximum 20. Have to remember it. No escaping from that. Is this clear? This is the structure which you need to remember because this can be asked in the examination. Thereafter, other than that, it's not an issue generally. You can concentrate on the concept of learning the terms in a systematic way. So can we move on? And this part, I hope you will be able to manage to do it over the next 5 to 6 days. Systematically learn one term each day, and you will automatically learn without any issues. So are we on the same page with regards to what to do with all these terms? My role is to tell you how to learn it. Other than that, you have to learn it. There's no other way. Only 2 terms in Mahamatyas, yes. Come on, everybody. Pritesh, you've called and then you've cancelled. You have a doubt, you want to talk to me? Yes, no. If you say yes, then I'll call you back. Anybody has any doubt? Because then I go back to economy society Dhamma. This needs time, as I said. I'm not asking you to learn it today. Systematically. Maybe by the time we end the course, it will help you. Okay. Yeah, that is the point, Samishta. That I have collated everything one place. You don't have to go anywhere else. Okay. Now, when we talk about the economy, we know very straightforward and very clear that they controlled everything. But what is interesting is that mining and metallurgy, which is what we call as metals, were a state monopoly, which is that the Loha Dhaksha and the Akara Dhaksha, nobody else could produce metal, which is a very interesting way of controlling a state monopoly. And we also know that there were certain products which were only produced by the state, which are called the Raj Panyas. For example, salt could only be produced by the state. Only produced by the state. So very simply, in the economy, the level of centralization comes out in the same way that we are able to see that everything was controlled very, very heavy-handedly, but also in a very centralized way. We know of different taxes also. You have bhaga, which could be 1/4 to 1/6. Tell me one thing. This term, has it changed over a period of time? No, it's the same. Nitin, I haven't took the yesterday's class. I can take today's class, and I need to look. There is a recording which will be available for 7 days. You watch yesterday's class. What we're doing today is independent of what we did yesterday, but it is connected because there's a general progression. So, bhaga is a term which persisted. Then you have Vartani, road tax, Nishkarma, export tax, Vishti. Now, this is a very interesting type of tax. Now, Vishti basically is a modern day equivalent or the modern day concept. You go to a restaurant, you eat a lot, don't pay the bill. Then, when you are washing the utensil, you are doing Vishti, which is doing a tax paid in forced labor. Till the point you do not just very simply don't clear off your debt, you have to work for the person as a bonded labor. That is Vishti. That's it. Rajpanya are state monopoly commodities. Right? Okay. Now we know that they were still using punch marked coins. And Jatak stories give us frequent references, which are basically Buddhist stories, give us very frequent references of large amount of traders, commodities moving around at this point of time. The Mauryan rule gave a lot of security to internal external trade, so it blossomed also. We have trade with West Asia, Central Asia, Egypt, with parts of Saudi Arabian Peninsula, with Southeast Asia also. And from Rajgriha to Kaushambi to Allahabad, what is Prayagraj today, all these were very well connected through road, Uttar Path and Dakshin Path, and the waterways also. Now, when we talk about the society, so economy, there's no real change other than what was there in the Mahajanpada period. Society is where we see something very dangerous developing in the Indian subcontinent. See, if you go by Megasthenes, he divided the whole society into 7 stratas, which is philosopher, farmer, herdsman, hunter, artisan, soldier. But the problem is these are occupations. These are occupations. We already know that the fold 4 Varna structure is there. But the most dangerous thing which developed during the Mauryan period is untouchability. Untouchability as a practice started during the Mauryan period, which is that within the Shudra community or with the Shudra community, there was further social exclusion in order to now add this concept of purity, and the worst of the worst practices in the Indian subcontinent, which is untouchability, comes in the most powerful empire at this point of time. When we talk about women's position, equally low and subordinated to men in that sense, freedom was second to none. And what we see further is that wage labor is something which we already saw, which is karamkara. But bonded labor and slave labor still persisted. So when we talk about society, before we go to Dhamma, society, the most significant development at this point of time is untouchability. Untouchability developed within the Vedic Brahmanistic fold. So when I'll give you a summary, this is the most important social development and the worst of all in that regard. So we have now covered the political, economic, and social. Anybody has any issue here? Because then I go into a pure discussion of Dhamma and then we end this topic. No? Anybody any issue? It was a gradual progression. It's how did it develop? It's not that it came on one random day. It developed as a part of the concept of purity within the Varna system itself. Okay. Can I move forward? Have to be more vocal? Yes or no? The break is coming once I cover Maurya. Okay. Slave labor, Vishti, wage labor, 3 types. Yes, in a way, yes. Samishta, yes. Oh. Now comes our beloved Dhamma. Now, Ashokan Dhamma is one of the most talked about, most studied of all aspects of the Mauryan Empire. Now, Ashoka was one of the most favorite Buddhists for the Buddhist community itself. The Sangha generally promoted Ashoka quite a lot. We already know that the third Buddhist council happened under his auspices. He put in a lot of money to spread the message of Buddhism and also spread Buddhism to Southeast Asia, to Sri Lanka generally. We also know that he built close to 84,000 stupas, which is again a little bit exaggerated number. But a stupa basically represents Buddha. We'll discuss this in art and culture. So he spent quite a lot. He spread the message. He basically was a devout Buddhist, but he was not basically fully a Buddhist converted person. He took the Buddhist philosophy and molded it according to his understanding. So we tend to argue that Ashoka converted to Buddhism, but Ashoka was influenced by Buddhism and he made Buddhism a guiding light in his life generally. Buddhist texts will talk about Ashoka obviously quite a lot because Ashoka is Ashoka for them, and he's spreading a lot of what we call as the way Buddhism is spreading is because of Dhamma and Ashoka. So Ashoka's Dhamma was equally important for Buddhism and for Ashoka, because it was not pure Buddha, because nowhere does Ashoka talk about the most important philosophy of Buddhism. What is the core philosophy of Buddhism? What Buddha argued was the answer to all the dukkhas in the world. Yes, the Ashtang Marg, which is the eightfold path. But the eightfold path is not mentioned anywhere only. If he was a Buddhist, he would have talked about the eightfold path. But the eightfold path is not talked about anywhere. The Ashtang Marg is not talked about anywhere. It's just that he used Buddhism as a way of propagating his Dhamma, which was his politico-religious philosophy. So understand this point, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's no conversion aspect here. Ashoka very simply adopted Buddhism and molded it according to his understanding. And this is a very important point you need to understand, because Dhamma is not pure Buddhism. Dhamma is actually an interpretation of Buddhism. So when we talk about Dhamma as generally a principle, see, he spread the message of Dhamma and in a way Buddhism through, as I said, the major rock edicts, which are 14 major rock edicts. And there are close to 18 to 20 what we call as minor rock edicts. Now, obviously, remembering the minor rock edicts is very, very difficult. But UPSC has now, for the past 5 years, made it a point to ask one or two major rock edicts for sure. And in that context, the location of the major rock edicts become important. So for me, there are 3 maps which I'm giving you. All of them have the most important positions and the most important locations of these major and minor rock edicts. I'll tell you which are the most important ones. Please, I'll put it into the NCRT map itself so that you can concentrate here. See, the Mansehra and Shahbazgadi are considered important generally because they are not in Brahmi script, but a script which was used in what we call as Iran, Iraq, or Central Asia quite a lot, which is called Khoroshti. Then the Jaugoda and Dhauli, elephant and inscription, are considered very, very important. Thereafter, the Musky inscription is considered very, very important, because it is in Musky inscription that we find the first reference to the Ashokan epithet, Devanam Piyadasi. Devanam Piyadasi, the meaning that it is Ashoka, was actually found in the Musky inscription itself. So, the Sopara and Girnar are the ones which are generally on the outskirts. So, the Mansera, Shabazgadi, Kandhar, Dhauli, Chaugada, the Sopara, Girnar are one of the most important inscriptions which you have to remember, because their locations are important. If you add Kalsi to it, you will have all the major rock edicts in that sense. I have one more map which is there in, this was a 6th class map, this is the 12th class map. Again, Mansera, Shabazgadi, Kandhar, Girnar, Sopara, Jaugada, then you have Shishupalgarh, but you will also have here Dhauli. That is why the different maps are different ones, and Kalsi. The distinction of these is that they are in a different script. They're a different script. I will show you that script also. They are in Brahmi script. They are in Khoroshti script. See, in India, the mother of all scripts is Brahmi. And over a period of time, all scripts, be it Devanagari, be it Bengali, Malayalam, Tamil, all have evolved out of early Brahmi. And the one which he used, because you tell me one thing, if I write in France a signboard in Hindi, does it make sense? Does it make sense? No, because they can't understand it only. So, very simply, he wrote it in a script, Khoroshti script, which had Greek language on it, so that the people in this sector could understand what he's trying to say. So, in Mansera, Shabazgidi, and Kandhar, he did not use Brahmi, but rather used Khoroshti Greek language. This kind of strategic understanding is unparalleled, because he knew that if I write something which is in a different language, it will make no sense itself. So within India, we see early Brahmi plus either Prakrit Pali, and in the outside sector or in the frontier sector, it was Khoroshti plus Greek. I hope you understand the difference between script and language. I have told you that previously also. Script is the way you write a language. Language is the phonetical system or the symbol system which is there. So one language can be written in multiple scripts itself. So very simply, a very simple example of this is this. This is Hindi language written in two scripts, Devanagari and the Roman English script. So same way, early Brahmi could be used to write multiple languages, which is Prakrit or Pali, and Khoroshti script could be written or used to write Greek language. Greek language has its own script also, but he very strategically chose a script which was very common in the Pakistan-Afghanistan sector. So please understand this point very, very clearly, that Ashoka was not doing this blindless, in a blind way. It was not random. It was rather a very conscious way of pushing a message in a language which was clear to the in-person entering into that sector. So are we clear with regards to the variation in script and language, and why was that important for Ashoka generally? No, Abhinav, you can't call Ashoka an Arhat. Arhat would be a very far-fetched, simplistic understanding. That's an exaggeration. Okay. Now comes the last point before, after which I'll take a break, which is that what are the principles of Dhamma? This can again be asked more towards an optional level, but generally you should know what are the principles of Dhamma. The first principle, as we know, is of Ahimsa. But Ashoka's ahimsa was very, very different from Jain ahimsa. I'll tell you why. Because on his major rock edict one, his concept was, I will ban animal sacrifices and also ban animal sacrifices on festive gatherings, including killing of animals, and also reduce the killing of animals in the royal kitchen. So vegetarianism will be promoted. Now tell me one thing, which religion on festive occasions has a concept of animal sacrifices? Historically, not today, historically. Vedic Brahmanism. Vedic Brahmanism is not fully about animal sacrifices, but Ashwamedh, a Vedic ritual, horse sacrifice. Very simply, the concept was that through this, he was indirectly, not fully, indirectly using that Buddhist propaganda to talk against the Vedic Brahmanists or early Hinduism in that. Same way, he said that I will have very sweeping regulations in which animal sacrifices cannot happen. And his concept of non-violence was basically towards animals. The second principle which he used or which he talked about was the concept of good social conduct, which is that ceremonies performed by people, especially women, on the occasions of illness, marriage, and birth should also be discontinued. Again, which is the religion at this point of time which has an emphasis on rituals and ceremonies on different occasions of life? Again, Vedic Brahmanism. So, are you getting my point to say that, or are you able to see that Dhamma is basically a jibe on the Brahmin community? That, okay, you are doing ceremonies, I don't like that. You're doing rituals, I don't like that. And therefore, not explicitly pushing it as a Buddhist agenda, he's just putting it into edict saying that I discourage it. And for him, ahimsa was not Jain ahimsa, was a very flexible ahimsa on how he wanted to understand non-violence. Further, Ashoka's Dhamma was also about mutual respect and the concept of having good relationship between different religious communities. If your empire has Vedic Brahmanism, Buddhism, Jainism, Ajivikism, four major religions, would you want tolerance to be an important principle? Yes, you want to be, because that is the only way you can consolidate. You can consolidate by asking for and talking about tolerance. Then he went further to argue that I have not fully renounced war, but I have redefined war to righteous conquest. Very simply, any war which is for the right reason is a righteous war. Any war which is for the wrong reason is a non-righteous war. Just and unjust war. Therefore, not fully shunning up war, but very simply, I will only fight if it is the right war itself. Then he created a whole cadre. We already know the Dhammamatras, who went on spreading the message of Dhamma itself. And last but not the least, he said that I believe in going around talking about peace rather than going around basically instilling fear. So, Dhamma, if you look at it, is based on three basic principles: ahimsa, social conduct, and tolerance. All very, very important at this point of time for consolidating an empire. Now, something which you will not find in books, something for which you would have to go to an extreme length to actually find it. I have given you in these two slides the 14 rock edicts and what is their message. Now, many a times they ask you this, but I want you to use it in the essay paper to write better answers for any other subject. See, tolerance, religious violence, the concept of conflict, and the basic way communities fight. This is extremely relevant for modern India also, or for what is happening today. So in an essay paper, you can write how Ashoka talked about something 800 years ago, and we are still having issues with that. This type of answer, this type of approach is going to be extremely important for you, because if in the essay paper you write historical context, it will actually help you quite a lot. So understand this point. You don't have to learn the ones which you have to learn, I'll tell you, but generally you can use it in your basic understanding to write better answers. For example, see, Rock Edit 1 said prohibition of animal sacrifice festive gathering, not important to us. Then Rock Edit 2 said construction of different tanks and all, mentions. Now, this is an important edict because it mentions the three most important southern polities which we are going to discuss after the break itself, which is Chola, Pandya, and Kerala Putras. He does not use the word Chera, remember, and Tamrapani, which is Sri Lanka. It is in the Rock Edict too, because this has been asked in the examination, which edict talks about the southern kingdoms or which are mentioned in the Rock Edict too. So this is very important. Then 3 is respect Brahmins. Then 4 is preach non-violence, the concept of Dhamma Gosha, which is the sound of the Dhamma. Then 5 is humane treatment of slaves, appointment of Dhammamatras. 6 is all people are my children, all men are my children. The concept comes from 6. So you only have to remember 2. Then you have to remember 7, which is tolerance amongst other religions. This is a very important edict which you need to remember and can be used in the examination also. 7. Then 8, Dhammayatras. 9, discontinue rituals. 10, Dhamma, evil. 11, doesn't matter to us. 12, again, very important. People live in harmony and peaceful coexistence. Very, very interesting way of putting it. Then the third most important. So you have to do, remember, 2, 7, and thereafter 12, 13. 13 is the one, and you don't have to learn this, but 13 is the one which again mentions the 4 southern polities, but also mentions other 5 contemporary rulers of the world from Syria, Egypt, Macedonia, Greece, and Libya. This again, just you need to know which edict mentions the foreign relations of the Ashokan period, and that is 13. So you have to remember 2, 7, 12, 13. 7 can be used in essay paper to write better answers. If all of this is clear, then I give you a break, and when I come back, I make a timeline and consolidate everything, because then we will move to the next module, which is module number 4. This is 4, 5. Yes, please have to be more vocal. Yes, no, say something. Previous year questions I will do, not right now. That is a separate issue altogether. Are we clear with the Mauryan theme? What is there? Sources, terms, administration, Dhamma, Dhamma as a concept. All of this perfectly clear. Yes? Great. Perfect. So, because I've gone for more than 1.5 hours, I'll give you a 15 minutes break. Don't worry. We come back at 12 p.m. And when we come back 12 p.m., we will go the next 1 hour and revise, and thereafter going to post Mauryan period. Clear? Can we take a break? Yes? Okay. Perfect. So I'll see you at 12 p.m. 15 minutes break, cool down, consolidate, come back. I'll make the timeline and we will revise. See you. Welcome back. Okay. So if you want to call and talk to me, Pritesh, we can do that. If you want to call, ask something, because then I give you question. If we had to write the contribution, see, Shamishta, the problem is you firstly don't have to write about contributions of Ashoka, because the question is going to be most probably a MCQ question. But if you are thinking about optional, for example, or for Indian Forest Services, I think ancient and medieval comes in the mains also. The point is that you can talk about the political religious understanding, but do not undercut the fact that he also had a transformation of heart. We are not undercutting the fact that he also had guilt. It was a moral transformation also, but the way he used Dhamma is a separate issue altogether, right? These are two very different things which you need to understand. Anybody who wants to call and ask, call. Pritesh, you've sent a request, but now you are not telling me if you want to talk or not. Okay. No, I think Indian Forest Service not optional has ancient. Indian Forest Service mains GS paper, the general studies paper, has ancient medieval also questions as subjective questions. I think some of you would be preparing for Indian Forest Services. They could confirm that. Previously, a lot of students had emailed me. See, the point is ancient medieval for prelims, which is UPSC. Civil Service examination is mostly objective. But Indian Forest Services, it is also subjective, objective both. Okay. No doubt. Can we revise? Can we revise? Yes. Okay. We need 2, 3 slides. Okay. Later Vedic. After this, once I have revised with you vis-a-vis this, I will also now give you a very important split in the timeline, and we will go when we go into post, what we call as post Mauryan. We have to discuss these things in a very interesting way. But till this point, if I've told you that we've concentrated on the North Indian sector, now we will also split and go into North and South both. So just as a form of revision, just very simply, not very detailed, no state, no state, early state formation. Here you have mature state. Here you have tribal state or polity. Here you have territorial kingship. monarchies and oligarchies, centralized monarchical system. Thereafter, simple society, complex society, complex society, egalitarian, occupationally divided. Then no rituals and burials, naturalistic. Thereafter, you also have fire, hunting, gathering. You have microliths, domestication of animals. Here you have agriculture, sedentary life, and you have surplus. Here you have agri plus hunting plus gathering and trade, internal and external. No trade. Pastoralism. Women, men. Then comes the more Vedic Brahmanism, fourfold Varna, agriculture. Women are subordinated to men. You have taxation, hereditary kingship, but no currency. Mahajanpada currency, punch marked coins, new religion, no trade, internal and external trade, and Maurya's centralized monarchical systems. You have elaborate bureaucracy, but the most important, untouchability develops. Other than that, internal external trade still there. Punch marked coins. Anybody has any issue here? Dhamma, if you want to add, you can write Dhamma. This is a more informal, but again, I think it would have helped you consolidate what we've done till this point. We have finally reached from 2 million BCE to 10,000 to 4,000 to 2,600 to 1,500 to 1,000 to 600 to 324 to 184 BCE. Yes? Anybody has any issue, you want to call, you want to ask me something, because till this point then I will presume everything is clear in your mind. Yes, no, something. Okay. Okay. Now, in a way, we have come till here. If you go by the NCRT timeline from Ashoka Empire, Macedonia, punch-marked coins, we now have to go into a period about which students don't know a lot of things. But before I do that, we'll come to the questions in the end of the class. We have to start post-Mauryan dynasties. Now, something very important to understand here. This is module number 5. Nobody's asked me till this point that how did the Mauryans decline. Basically, Brihadrat will be the last ruler. He will be killed by a person called Pushyamitra Shunga, who was a Brahmin, who was basically a Brahmin, but also his commander-in-chief, his Senapati. He will be frustrated by the Mauryan politics and he will kill Brihadrat. Now, you will realize that in none of the modules I will be talking about decline, because decline has a standard recipe. Decline has a standard recipe, and I am sharing a very important recipe with you so that you can also make decline at home. So first, what you need is a flame of a weak ruler. This is the first thing which you need for decline. Then what you do is that you take a pan, keep it over this flame, and then add the following ingredients. Corruption in administration, fiscal issues, lower tax revenue, internal disturbances, and when you will make all of these together, the plate which is served to you is the decline of a kingdom or empire. All empires have the same recipe of decline: weak ruler, corruption in administration, fiscal issues, lower tax revenue, internal issues, and swad anusar, as much as you want, you can add even external warfares, external factors. It's about how or what type of dish you want to make. In certain dishes, the corruption in administration may be a problem. In certain dishes, the fiscal issues may be a major issue. In certain dishes, the fire called the weak ruler is very, very problematic. So this dish, it is universal. Decline of Gupta, decline of Kushanas, decline of Sakas, decline of Shungas, decline of the Mauryas. Everybody's decline is like this only. Everybody declines like this only. So very simply, the point is that the heat matters, how incompetent the ruler is, and how much frustration there is. If you can want, you can also add the fact that there can be one more dish, which is frustration in society. Frustration in society. For example, the frustration which was there at this point of time was the fact that the politics of this dhamma and all did not go very well with the different sections of the society, and therefore the Brahmin somehow was a senapati, and he killed Brihadrat, saying that this type of politics makes no sense. Only the administrative setup, see what happens is it's a domino effect also. When the ruler is weak, automatically administration becomes more and more weaker, and when it will become weaker, it will become more and more corrupt, and therefore it will in turn also lead to fiscal issues, because people will start to put money into their pocket than the treasury, and at the end of the day, internal issues will emerge and external factors will also play a role. External actors will thereafter also start to act in a way so as to destroy the empire itself. So to the question, how do empires decline? I hope now you are in a position to answer. And very simply, if they give you 5 to 6 different options, you will be able to identify. They all come in the same category. They all come in the same concept itself. Are we clear with regards to this? Yes? Because I'm not going to have a discussion with regards to decline of anyone. Because I have already told you what is the standard strategy or standard pattern which emerges before any of these empires decline. Are we clear about this? Because then I enter into a what we call as a zone where there is not one but two but three but 8 different players which will emerge in the Indian sector. And here I need your imagination also. Here I need your concentration also. So can I move forward? Yes? Okay. Module number 5. R.S. Sharma has three chapters. The Central Asian Contact, Satavahana, and the Dawn of History in Deep South. You can ignore the megalithics in this because megalithics, I will tell you, is more or less enough here. Simple point is 3 chapters, but the problem is not very comprehensive. Here you have to concentrate with me because it's a very critical zone in that sense. Before I talk to you about megalithics, I need a blank slide. Okay, yes. Okay. Now, everybody has to concentrate next 40 minutes, half an hour, generally important. If you're able to understand this, you will never be able to forget it forever. So please pay attention now. See, I have been telling you the North Indian story. However, the southern sector had a different timeline, a different age, and a different concept altogether at this point of time. And if I have to actually make a correct timeline, it is going to look something like this, which is that there will be a divergence at one point in the North and the South Indian story. And the divergence is such that Paleolithic, no issues. The period of Mesolithic, no issues. Till Neolithic, no issues. Till Indus Valley civilization, no issues. The North and the South Indian story is more or less the same. And non-Harappan Chalcolithic cultures. So very simply, from 2 million BCE to 10,000 to 4,000 to 2,600 to close to what we call as 1700 BCE, the North and the South Indian story is more or less the same. However, thereafter, North and South diverge. In North India, what will we have after IBC? What will we have after IBC? Yes, very good. Early Vedic, later Vedic, Mahajanapadas, and Mauryas. But in South India, this period from 1500, 1000, 600, 324 to 184 BCE. In South India, we have a different concept altogether, and that is called megalithic phase in South India. And by 200 BCE, rather not 200 but 300 BCE, we will see the first proper state formation in South India, which is called Sangam age. So it's called Sangam age. So very simply, the concept is that I have not been talking about the megalithic phase in South India or even the Sangam age in that regard. Now, this division you will not find in any other book or any other source. So please do understand that between 1500 to 300 BCE, from first millennium to the 3rd to 4th century BCE, there was a phase in South India which is called the megalithic phase, and the Vedic and the Mahajanpada concept is extremely North Indian centric. So now that I have basically reached 184, 185 BCE with you, now I am pivoting away and going to discuss the South Indian sector with you. And the process is going to be, we only go to post Maurya once we have discussed megalithic and Sangam polities, and then our story is going to be complete in that sense. Is this making sense to you? Is this making sense to you? That in a way, I have been shielding one sector with you. Now I want to create the larger picture. This is a very, very important slide for you. Please pay attention, and this can answer most of the questions. If you've been with me in modern India previously, or this is your first interaction with me, timelines can help you answer half of the questions. Just knowing where what empire is, where what period is, you can answer half of the questions. So just knowing the chronological sequence of history can actually help you quite a lot. So now let's discuss megalithic. Now, when we talk about megalithic, the reason why we call it megalithic is because they have a very interesting feature. The feature is that these cultures who have iron technology are agropastoral, are complex society, had a very interesting characteristic, a very interesting feature, which is that they used to bury their dead in elaborate burial structures called megalithics, which is, mega means big stone burials. If you look at the burials of megalithic cultures, they have extremely elaborate burial structures, and imagine making something like this without modern tools or lifting ability. Today you will bring in a crane and actually put it on it. This was done with only human power along with certain animals for help. Very simply, wherever we have found megalithic cultures, we have for sure found these elaborate burials around it. So very simply, megalithic period in South India is a period where we find iron tools, we find agropastoral evidences where they were doing animal husbandry also, but a little bit of agriculture also. They had complex society, but our understanding is limited is limited because no texts or script or literature. This would be in contrast to which period? This would be in contrast to which age in North India? Megalithic practice happened in southern part of India, mostly peninsular India. Yes, Vedic, where we have a lot of texts, or we have the Rig Veda, which gives us a very beautiful picture of that period. The problem is our understanding is limited to only these things, and we believe that there was what we call as limited urbanization during this period in South India. But the most interesting aspect is megalithic is connecting from the Indus Valley to the period of the Sangam. But the most interesting thing is, are we clear with regards to basic characteristics? I'll read it out from the PPT also. Iron, agropastoral, complex society, you have limited agriculture urbanization and burial patterns which are very, very elaborate. Are we clear with regards to this? Because then I talk about the most interesting thing about this period. It is not basically prehistory, it would be in between. It's a proto-historic period because we don't know if they actually knew language or script or not. So it is in a way a proto-historic period. Early writing would have been there, but it is not historical period in that sense. No text, that is for sure, but we believe that they did have something which we have not been able to find because limited urbanization and big stones and the way they were actually very iron centric, we can't call it fully prehistoric, but it is pre-proto in between. Can I move a step further? What is the most interesting thing about these megalithic cultures? Okay, these are contemporaries to the Vedic period. Yes. Now see, in North India there's a pattern. The pattern is stone, copper, iron. Am I correct or am I wrong? We move from Neolithic to Chalcolithic to Vedic. So technology went from stone to copper to iron. There's a three-step process, or the third step of that process is iron technology. Iron technology is always considered very, very important. But in South India, we see something very interesting. There are two types of sites. At one site we find the standard stone, copper, iron technology, and this is minority of the sites, because at most of the sites we find the interesting concept stone, iron technology. Skip copper phase, straight from Neolithic to megalithic. Now, can anybody tell me why is that in South India it would have been easier to straight away go with iron technology than to actually find copper? Physical geography of India. Tell me. Yes. The reason, as Sushmita says, as Vivek says, is in the southern sector, the Dharwad sector, iron oxide is available and iron is available more easily. In the peninsular sector, even today, we have most of the iron mines in this sector. The copper availability is very limited. So rather than going for copper straight, because of the abundance of iron, they were able to actually automatically shift to iron than actually copper. So they bypassed, or they skipped, or they just jumped from Neolithic to iron technology. This distinction is not there in North India. North India, we have seen a standard stepped pattern from stone to copper to iron, but in South Indian sites, it is not necessary that you will find a stone copper iron gradation. It could be stone to iron automatically. This is one of the most interesting features of megalithic sites, because certain megalithic sites have chalcolithic history, but certain megalithic sites also have what we call as Neolithic antecedents. So some places we find what we call chalco to mega, and in some places we find Neolithic to megalithic. Are you understanding the significance and the reason? Again, quite logical because of the way we have deposits of different minerals across India. Yes. So let's consolidate all of this through the PPT itself. See, megalithics are frequently connected with the iron technology in peninsular India. The word megalithics comes from the word megas, which is great, and lithos, which means stone. It is linked to a burial practice. Megalithics or megalith cultures had different monuments with large and very big slabs of stone to celebrate their dead. In the Indian subcontinent, most of these sites have been found in the Vindhya, Aravali, and even meaning in the northern sector till the Aravali range, and in the deep south quite a lot. The structures are quite ingenious. For a optional student, you have to also learn dolomite, this, that. Here for GS, you don't have to learn that. The subsistence pattern megalithic site or a megalithic culture was that we have found food grains, we found artifacts. Most probably they are agro-pastoral, which is that limited agriculture was also there, hunting gathering was also there, and pastoralism was also there. And we found iron, gold, silver, copper, bronze. And the most important characteristics or the importance of megalithic is that it actually links the Sangam period with the Neolithic Chalcolithic phase of South India. It is the missing link between this period. But the most interesting aspect is it should be noted that in South India there has been no copper or bronze age, but only the iron age that emerged straight after Neolithic age. One reason may be the paucity of copper against iron sources which are available in the Hyderabad, Kurnool, the Bellary and the Dharwad districts of Karnataka, Salem and Tiruchirappalli district of Tamil Nadu. Because they have a lot of iron deposits very readily available to them. So there can be Neolithic to megalithic, and there can be straight from stone to iron. So very simply, South India does not actually take the same pattern as North India, and therefore the megalithic sites which have been marked by the NCRT are the sites of what we call as Brahmagiri and Adi Challur. Adi Challur, as it is, has been in the news quite a lot previously, vis-a-vis being a site where we have finding more and more understanding. So, whilst we have Mehergarh and Burzahom and Kodiva and Chirand, which would go through a copper phase and then to an iron phase, Brahmagiri and Adi Challur could straight away go to iron. And that is the most important distinction about this whole period itself. So, when we talk about our timeline, this is the phase of iron technology in South India. So anybody has any issue in megalithic? Any issue in megalithic? Come on. Can I move one step forward now? Because then I go talk about Sangam and we take a break. Okay. Now, whilst we had the Mauryas in North India, in North India. In South India, between 300 BCE to 300 CE, which is basically 3rd century BCE to 3rd century CE, which is a period of how many years? Which would be how many years total? Total how many years? Very good. 600-year period. What we see is what we call as political formations whose history is written by reading the Sangam literature, and that is why they are called Sangam polities or Sangam age. Basically, 3 Sangam or conferences happened, hosted by one of the Sangam polities themselves, which is the Pandyas, at Madurai, at Katapakatam and Madurai, where literature was compiled. And the literature which was compiled, because it was compiled at Sangams, they are called Sangam literature. And when we read this Sangam literature, we get to know about the Cheras, Cholas, and Pandyas, who are basically the theme and content of the Sangam literature. So very simply, as soon as I say to you Sangam age, Sangam literature, I mean to say the Chera, Chola, and the Pandya. But as the Vedic texts tell us about the Vedic age, Sangam texts tell us about the Sangam age. Are we clear with regards to the nomenclature? The earliest Tamil literature is termed as Sangam literature because it was standardized by a Sangam academy of scholars who met at Madurai under the Pandya rulers. They roughly give us a history between 3rd century BCE to 3rd century CE, and the main theme is the wars between the Chera Chola Pandyas. The Sangam literature, unlike the Vedas, which are only 4 texts, is much more diverse because you have some early works, you have some anthologies, the Etugotai, which is basically the story, the glorified story of certain rulers. Then you have what are called the 10 short poems, the Idylls, which is Patupatu, and you have the 18 minor works and 5 epics. Together, all of them are called Sangam literature. Now you know what is going to follow further is that you need to know Sangam text names because they come in the examination. Thereafter, we just have to go through the Chera Chola Pandya's basic history. Before I do that, before we discuss the Sangam text itself, everybody is following me till this point. No issues. Generally, come on. Yes, you are trying. You are getting the point which I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to now bring the South Indian story also to the same point as the North Indian story. In North India, we reach till modern period. Now I'm bringing the North South Indian story also to the modern period, or which is the Sangam period in South India. Yes or no? Come on. Yes. Okay. Now, these texts which I'm telling you, without fail have to learn them because UPSC is asking it out of very basic, what we call as match the following questions, or as a question of very simply sprinkling it here and there. So the first text which you need to learn is Tolkapitayam, author Tolkapitaya, and it is a Tamil grammar text. Tamil grammar text written in Tamil. All of them written in Tamil. Tamil Sangamej. Thereafter, you have Madurai Kanji, and this talks about a very important port which is called Kaveri Patnam and the trade which is happening. So it gives us economic history. Then you have the Murugarupa Udai, which is the story or the praise of God Muruga, who's a very important god in the deep south itself, and this gives us religious history. Then you have the Palamolai, which is the rituals which Brahmins have to follow. This tells us how Vedic Brahmanism had percolated to South India. Very simply, through the Mauryan dynasty, how the practice of Vedic Brahmanism had reached, or the what we call as early Hinduism had started to, the practices had started to percolate into the southern sector itself. Then you have a text which is very, very important, Thirukural, written by Thiruvarur. This is a text very, very important because the finance minister for the past 2 to 3 years has been referring to this text in the budget every time, because this is one of the most interesting texts. This is a text of ethics and morals, sometimes also called the Bible of the Sangam literature, ethics, moral values. And you would have seen that if you've ever seen the raw copy, which is not the not in the newspaper, if you've ever seen the budget raw as she reads out, she always has certain what we call as excerpts of the Thirukural in it, therefore telling us the basic moral with which she is actually bringing in new reforms. So these texts are extremely important. Tokapitayam, because of the Tamil grammar aspect. That is why we are able to read this text further. And Tirukural. You have to learn it. None have to be skipped. All have to be learned here. 5 very important texts in that regard. Thereafter, we have one more set of texts which are the epics of South India. You have Sheela Padikaram, which is the story of Karikal Chola related to the Chola dynasty. So this is basically the history of the Chola dynasty. Then you have the Mani Mengalai, which is the story of how Buddhism also started to spread in South India. Buddhism spreading to South India. And last but not the least, we have a Shiva, what is called Shivaga Sindhamanai, which is the story of Jainism coming to South India. So you can see all of these texts have their importance because they tell us a very important or critical element of each of these aspects of religious, political, and geographical, and even the concept of social history through these texts. So this is basically the Vedic text in that regard. These are the Sangam texts which give us a very important bird's eye view, but also a very important concept of their history. By reading all of them, we have been able to reconstruct the history of the Cheras, who basically ruled over parts of Kerala. Then the Pandyas, who were the basically the kingdom of what we call as pearls, and the Cholas, who managed more or less the area of Tamil Nadu and thereafter Andhra Pradesh. The simple point is the Chera, Cholas, and the Pandyas. I am gone out of focus. Yes, the Chera, Cholas, Pandyas together are the three which actually were holding the most important positions, with the Mauryas being in the north. Mauryas being in the north. So the simple point is, Shiva is telling us, and I'll push it to you itself, a very interesting saying out of Palamolai. Too much of anything is good for nothing is a palamolai, which means a proverb. See, this is a way of in which it evolved, but palamolai was a very important text which talked about this proverbial knowledge itself. That is why these texts are very important in that regard. So first is remembering their names. Total 8 have to remember, no escaping that fact. The more you will read it, the more you will understand it. Now, the second aspect is the history which comes out of it. Are we clear with regards to Sangam text? Sangam text, you will see for sure in your life in UPSC, you will for sure 1 to 2 Sangam text will be sprinkled around somewhere for sure. That is a standard thing in that regard. Yes? Okay. Now, the first major dynasty which basically was mentioned in the Sangam literature itself is the Pandyas. The emblem of the Pandyas was the fish, and very simply, Pandyas were known for pearls. They had the best access to pearls, and their port Korkai was very, very important generally. Capital Madurai, mentioned by Megasthenes also, and the major rock edict also. The Romans also actually traded with them quite a lot. All of Roman pearls were mostly Pandyan pearls. So we have mention of Augustus Caesar and Trojan in Pandya text, what we call as Pandya texts of Sangam age. And we also have reference to Pandyas in one of the two most important texts of North India, which is Ramayana and Mahabharata. And the most important ruler is Nadunda Jalian, who performed even the Ashwamedh, which means that they were now also using the same ritualistic aspects of North India. So, three basic things which you need to remember: Jalian, Roman reference, pearls, Pandyas, and the fact that they were also following Vedic rituals. Any issues here? Three basic facts: Nadunda Ramayana Mahabharata reference, Augustus Caesar, Trojan, Roman reference, and Korkai is their port. And if you've seen the 2023 paper, Korkai was actually mentioned. I will show it to you when we'll do the 2023 paper. Just by doing the map, you can answer any of the questions generally. Thereafter, the Cholas, these are called the early Cholas. Their emblem is the tiger. The most important ruler of this dynasty, Karikal Chola, and he is the one who developed and constructed a dam on the Kaveri, which still survives. And he was also the one who developed the city of Puha. He was the first to, very simply, the Cholas were the first to conquer Sri Lanka, parts of northern Sri Lanka. They have two very important trading centers, Kaveri Pattanam and Urayur. So you see it on here, Kaveri Pattanam and Urayur. Very important. Thereafter, they ruled generally with a very important presence in the Bay of Bengal. Sometimes we believe that Bay of Bengal was dominated by the Cholas at this point of time. Later, for sure they will dominate, but the Chola shipping at this point of time was also very good. Then come the Cheras. The Cheras are the most interesting because they have a very deep connection with the Romans, because Augustus Caesar temple was made in the Chera territory, and over and above that, the most important, what we call as port, Muzirish, we had a Roman regiment and a Roman temple made here. So Malabar coast, Vanji, but most important, Tondi and Muziris. Muziris and Tondi, two very important. You have Muziris, Tondi, two very, very important ports of this period. Have to remember them. Again, comes in the examination standard protocol. Romans had two regiments here, along with a temple of Augustus Caesar. And the most important ruler, the early rulers, Udain he's also has mentioned in the Mahabharata, and the greatest ruler of the Cheras is Sengu Vatan or Red Chera, who also was the one who established the Patni cult, which is a very important goddess cult in South India. So I will not go further. I'll take previous year questions to before we go for lunch. But the basic point is I have brought two stories together. I brought two stories together for you. We have now understood the Chera Chola Pandyas. Mauryas, we know Ashoka, we know Dhamma. But when we talk about Sangam polities, when we talk about Sangam age itself, Pandya, who's the most important ruler? Revise with me and then we take the question. Who's the most important Pandya ruler? Come on. Nadunajalian, very good. Who's the most important Chera ruler? Karikal Chola is Chola. Chera is Senguvatan. Perfect. Only three names you have to remember: Nadunjalian, Karikal Chola, Senguvatan, and the Roman connection of the Pandyas and the Cheras, and their ports: Muzirish, Tondi, Kaveri Patnam, Urayur, Korkai. Five names. Can you remember this much? If you can, this theme is also more or less done. Yes, revise once, you will realize it's not difficult. It's actually not difficult, it's very straightforward. Just have to remember port names and one name. Just need Rajendra Chola, Raja Chola is that imperial Chola. That is early medieval. Don't mix up things when I'm not giving them the names. Vivek, you have done previously also, still you're mixing it up. Simple point is that three names and five ports. That's it. Okay. Can I now take certain previous year questions so that we can just now go for lunch? Two questions I'll take, then we'll go for lunch. Okay, perfect. We had done these. Okay, take this. With reference to the difference between the culture of Rigvedic Aryans and Indus Valley people, which of the following statements are correct? Rigvedic Aryans used the coat of mail and helmet in warfare, whereas the people of Indus Valley civilization did not leave any evidence of using them. Rigvedic Aryans knew gold, silver, copper, whereas Indus Valley people knew only copper and iron. Rigvedic Aryans had domesticated the horse, whereas there is no evidence of Indus Valley people having known or being aware of this animal generally. I'm giving you a minute, read it very closely. It's a very interesting question. There was a corrigendum which was also issued. We have to know which are the correct statements. Come on, it should be in front of you right now. Wrong. Vivek, how are you answering that? It's asking you which are the correct. Again, overthinking. As I thought. 33, 21, 33, 13. This question is a pure conceptual question. I'm more concerned about the 33 and 21%, which is B and C. Tell me one thing. Rigvedic Aryans domesticated horse. No evidence has been found of horse in Indus Valley civilization. Surkotada. Horse remains have been found. Only bones found. So isn't that telling you that they have an awareness of this animal? Why are you overthinking? I told you that Indus Valley people knew about the horse. We have found evidences of the horse. So whoever has marked very simply 3, the point is that you are not either listening to me or are not watching the videos in the right way, because some of you are watching recorded videos. Rigvedic Aryans knew gold, silver, copper. Indus Valley people knew iron. Indus Valley civilization is an iron age. Yes or no? Rigvedic Aryans used warfare and there is coat of mail and helmet. Yes, Indus Valley did not leave any evidence of using them. Totally correct. Is this question difficult? Because a lot of you got it wrong. Why? I want to know why you got it wrong. This 33 and 21%. Why are you marking 2 and 3 as correct? What was the logic? Great, Nitin, perfect. Confused, somewhere not mentioned, rather one area horse. That is the way archaeology works. So this is it's not Shotugai but Surkotada. Simple point is, please understand this. This is called who are Rigvedic Aryans? Ankit, you've been with me for now close to 12 to 13 hours. Rigvedic Aryans, Rigveda, early Vedic period they're talking about. So either you need revision or you're overthinking. If you need revision, perfect. But if you're overthinking, then it's a problem. A disease for which first you need to understand that you need to be cognizant of the fact that you are overthinking. 2 could have got eliminated automatically. That is a very simple thing. I've been making multiple timelines, one after the other. We just had a discussion about iron, copper. So very simple point, 2 should not, B should or D should not have been the answer. If you're answering B and D, then there's a fundamental issue. 1 and 3 I understand, but 3 also, very simply, I said in class, horse is there. So very simply, do not become, see, either you are analyzing it too much or it's a silly mistake. Silly mistake can be done with a revision, but if you're analyzing it too much, then it is a problem. Make sense? Are you getting, did you realize your mistake, or are you able to identify the issue in your thinking? Okay, one site will give you horse does not mean all, but that is the way archaeology works. Okay, now this we did. Okay, this is the last question we do. Consider following statements. Deification of Buddha. This is not trading but treading which is to walk. Treading the path of bodhisattvas, image worship and rituals. Which of the above is our features of Mahayanic Buddhism? Come on, this everybody should get correct if you were with me. Come on. Very easy question. The easiest of which we've done till this point. We did this yesterday itself. No, Shiva. ASI new findings only will become relevant once they come in NCRT. New findings is something which is coming, but that has to become standard knowledge for you to it become relevant for you. Again, 26%, 18%. I am not 47% totally correct. Mahayanic Buddhism. Ritual worship, yes. Making Buddha God. Buddha is God, yes. Bodhisattvas blindly Mahayanic. So some people eliminated third, which is idol worship. Some people eliminated first, which is again deification of Buddha. Either you don't know what is the meaning of deification. Deification means is to make a person God, deity. So all are exact. This is not even an old question. Very easy question, straightforward. 1, 2, and 3. Are you now getting the point how they're asking you questions? They don't care about facts. 1 to 2 questions, facts will come. Students sit with it and say, I will leave ancient and medieval. All questions are application of knowledge. Is this making sense? Can we go for lunch, or can I go for lunch, knowing that you are now on the right track, you are understanding everything, and you're getting the point of the discussion we are having? Yes? Okay. So I will see you at 2:05. I've taken some of your time, so I'll see you at 2:05, and we will start our discussion of post-mortem. Please do not miss the next part B, because once you miss part B, nothing will make sense. First half an hour, 45 minutes is going to be critical. So I will see you after lunch. Have a good lunch. Make sure that you join part B. Very, very important for ancient. Most of the questions can be made from this area. See you. Take care. Have a good lunch. I see you at part B at 2:05.